The thermostat was set to 72. I remember that because it was the only thing I still had control over. She walked past me in heels she hadn't worn since her cousin's wedding 2 years ago. Click, 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 each step louder than the last. Her perfume hit me before her words did, sweet and sharp, like cinnamon dust stirred up in a tight room. I didn't look up. I didn't ask where she was going. We both knew I already knew. That's when she dropped it. "I'm going on a date," she said, tugging at the gold earring I got her before we had a mortgage. Then, without so much as a glance, she added, "Try not to get too jealous." It wasn't even sarcastic. It was casual, like asking if I wanted anything from the store. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember crossing the room. But I remember opening the junk drawer, the one she always hated me digging through, and pulling out the folded note I had buried under expired coupons and old batteries. I had written it weeks ago, back when I still thought writing it might stop me from needing to use it. I handed it to her without a word. She raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" I didn't answer. She unfolded it. Slowly. The note said, "I hope he knows how you cry in your sleep. I hope he sees the closet full of broken promises I'm leaving behind. I hope he knows I made dinner on your birthday while you were working late with him." Her hands trembled just slightly. Her lips parted. But she didn't speak. So I did. "You don't need to come back." It was quiet for a beat. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. "You're being dramatic," she said. I pointed to the suitcase near the door. Mine, not hers. Already packed. Already zipped. "I'm not." And with that, I stepped outside. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry on the porch. I just kept walking. Past the gate. Past the driveway. Past the garden she used to water barefoot in July. The cinnamon scent still burned in my nose. And the closet door? Still open. I walked without checking my phone, without locking the door behind me, and without any idea where I was going. I didn't take the car, she needed it more than I did, or so I always told myself. Instead, I just walked. Down our quiet suburban street with all the porches that looked like ours. Down the block where our neighbor always waved but never remembered my name. I kept walking until I reached a bus stop I'd never used before. It smelled like wet leaves and cheap coffee. When I finally sat down on the cracked bench, the weight of everything didn't come crashing down like I expected. It dripped. Bit by bit. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was numbness mixed with this slow, dreadful realization that I had been living in someone else's script for over a year, maybe more. Somewhere along the line, Ray stopped writing her lines with me in mind. I'd just been left on stage, fumbling for a cue that never came. I took out my phone, not to text her, but to scroll. I don't know why. Habit, probably. I opened our shared photo album. The most recent edition was a blurry picture of a dog in someone's backyard I didn't recognize. No caption. No explanation. I scrolled further. The photos used to be of us. Us on hikes. Us on the couch. Us pretending to cook something complicated and ending up with frozen pizza. But those stopped months ago, replaced by pictures of sunsets I never saw, meals I never ate, and smiling people I didn't know. One face showed up more than once. A man. Tall, tan, square jaw, like someone cast to play the love interest in a romantic comedy. He wasn't in the forefront of any photo, just lingering in the background. Sometimes blurred, sometimes just a shoulder, but always there. I hadn't noticed him until now. My stomach turned. And not from jealousy, at least not the sharp, raging kind. This was the kind of jealousy that comes from being left out of your own life. I zoomed in on one photo where Ray was at a rooftop bar, holding a wine glass. Behind her was the man, sitting at the same table, turned slightly away, wearing a watch I had seen once, on our kitchen counter 2 months ago. She told me it was her coworkers. He left it during a group dinner. I believed her. Because I wanted to. The next bus came. I got on without checking the route. I just needed to move. Somewhere. Anywhere but home. The ride was quiet. An old woman sat beside me and didn't speak. She just held a bag of yarn and stared out the window like she was watching a movie she'd already seen. I ended up at a hotel. Not a fancy one. Just one of those off-the-highway kinds with a vending machine that eats your dollar and a room key that stops working if you breathe on it wrong. I handed over my card, gave a fake name, and didn't bother asking about breakfast. The room smelled like bleach and stale air conditioning. I dropped the suitcase on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. I should have felt something big, like freedom or grief or fury. But I just felt small. Like I was 10 years old again and just got picked last for dodgeball. Except this time, The team I thought I was on never even showed up. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling while the minibar hummed, and the TV played some infomercial about knives that never dull. I thought about texting Ray. Just one line. Did he buy you that dress? Or maybe, do you remember who I am? But I didn't. Instead, I opened my notes app and started typing the names of everyone I suspected knew. Her sister, always weirdly tight-lipped around me. Her friend Devin, who once accidentally texted Ray a winking emoji while she was in the shower. Her boss, who used to like my barbecue ribs a little too much at company picnics. By the time I was done, I had a list. A full guest list of the people who might have known before I did. People who watched me set up string lights in the backyard for Ray's birthday, while knowing full well she'd spent the night before in someone else's apartment. And none of them said a word. I closed the app and whispered to no one. You all left me standing there. Then I realized I hadn't even gotten to the worst part. Because the next morning, I got a text. From him. The man in the photos. And what he said. It cracked everything open again. The message came in at 6:07 a.m., just as the sun cracked through the dusty blinds of that lousy hotel room. I hadn't slept. My back ached from the springy mattress. My stomach felt like it was filled with rocks, and I was debating whether a vending machine breakfast counted as a low point or just a necessary evil. But then my phone buzzed, and all of that disappeared, like my body knew the second it started vibrating that everything was about to shift again. The sender wasn't in my contacts. Just a number. California area code. Ray and I live in Michigan. I stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen like it might explode. Then I tapped. Emery, I figured it was time you heard the truth from me instead of from her. I'm sorry for how this happened. Ray said she'd talked to you last night. I didn't think you'd find out like that. I want to explain everything, if you're willing. No name. No apology, really. Just that tone, the kind people use when they're trying to sound noble while stepping over the pieces of what they've broken. I sat there in silence, reading it over and over. I must have counted every word 15 times. And then, finally, I replied with a single line. Who are you? His answer came fast. Clayton. We met once. Ray's coworker. I was at the fundraiser you hosted last year, the one with the string lights and jazz trio. I felt the blood drain from my face. The fundraiser. I remembered it too well. Ray had begged me to organize it with her company because their actual event planner dropped out last minute. I'd spent 2 weeks building a string light rig with my bare hands in our backyard. I barbecued ribs for 40 people and took photos of everyone who showed up. She wore a long green dress that night. I remember thinking she'd never looked more beautiful. She danced with me once, then vanished into the crowd. He was there. I even shook his hand. That was the night I helped him impress her. That was the night she started calling him just Clay. My hands were shaking, but I kept messaging. I needed answers, even if they burned. How long? This time, the delay was longer. Maybe he was typing and deleting. Maybe he was afraid of saying it out loud. Or maybe he knew once he did, there was no going back. 10 months. But she said it was only physical at first. Then it got complicated. I didn't know she hadn't told you until recently. I swear. 10 months. I read those 2 words, and it felt like someone had just handed me a photo album from a life I never lived. 10 months ago, I was painting our bedroom while Ray laughed at a TikTok in the kitchen. 10 months ago, I was planning our vacation to Asheville. 10 months ago, I thought we were just tired. Just out of sync. Just needing time. But 10 months ago, she had already stepped away. Already started turning down the volume on our life, so she could hear someone else's laugh in her ear. I didn't reply. I didn't trust myself to type what I really wanted to say. And the worst part? It wasn't even that she cheated. It was that she let me keep trying. She let me walk barefoot over broken glass while she was dancing in a different room. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red. My hair was sticking up in all directions. I looked like someone who'd been lost for days. And maybe I had been. I splashed water on my face and walked back into the room, just in time for my phone to buzz again. Ray told me she was going to move out next week. She said she wanted to wait until you were in a better place. I told her that was cruel. A better place? What place was that? Was she hoping I'd land a raise, lose 10 pounds, and smile a little wider so she could feel less guilty about leaving? That maybe if I looked strong enough, she could walk away without anyone blaming her? No, that wasn't kindness. That was cowardice in disguise. I sat down on the bed, opened the notepad app again, and started listing every moment in the last 10 months that now felt like a lie. The Valentine's dinner she forgot. The out-of-town conference that got extended last minute. The time she cried watching a romantic movie and said, "Some people just stopped choosing each other." Each one hit differently now. I closed the app. Then I did something unexpected, even to myself. I messaged Clayton one more time. "Meet me. In person. You owe me that." Because I wasn't going to let my marriage end in text messages and quiet exits. If I was going to be erased, I wanted to at least hear the sound of the pen scratching across the final page. What he said next? He agreed. And not only that, he offered to show me something Ray had hidden from both of us. I don't know what I was expecting when I agreed to meet him. Maybe some sort of twisted closure. Maybe just a face to tie to the mess. Either way, I picked the place, an old, half-forgotten diner off the highway that smelled like burnt coffee and old linoleum, the kind of place no one accidentally stumbles into. I wanted it that way. No accidental run-ins. No familiar eyes. Just me, the guy who rewrote my marriage without my permission, and a plate of pancakes I knew I wouldn't touch. Clayton showed up 5 minutes early. Of course he did. Polished looking in that effortful, sleeveless confidence way that made me feel like I hadn't slept in days, because I hadn't. His shirt was tucked. His shoes had 0 creases. And when he sat down across from me, he didn't look smug. He looked scared. "Emery," he said quietly, like we were old coworkers instead of two people connected by a lie. I didn't offer my hand. Didn't nod. Just said, "Show me what you brought." He blinked, then pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. "It's all in there." I saved the thread when I found it. I picked it up, reluctant, already regretting this. The screen was open to a text conversation between Ray and someone named Allison. I scrolled slowly, trying to make sense of what I was reading. He's still clueless. I thought giving him the date line would finally trigger something, but nope. He just blinked like a puppy. I don't know how much longer I can pretend. OMG, you didn't say that to him. Dead serious. Try not to get too jealous. He looked like he just swallowed a lit candle. I almost felt bad. Almost. Anyway, Clay thinks we're telling him next week. That was the plan. But I don't know anymore. I think Emery might actually crack. The screen blurred for a second. I realized my hand was shaking. My eyes couldn't decide where to look. There were more messages. More laugh emojis. Mentions of me like I was a punchline at a dinner party I hadn't been invited to. And the worst part wasn't what Ray said. It was that Clayton had this conversation at all. "You knew," I said, low and flat. He ran a hand through his perfect hair and said, "I didn't. I didn't see these until last weekend. I was looking for a file she airdropped me and accidentally opened the wrong folder. I found screenshots of their chats, her and Allison, her and her cousin, even one with her hairdresser. They were all in on it." "In on what?" I asked, already afraid of the answer. "She's been planning to leave for months. But she didn't want to deal with the guilt of a clean break. So she turned you into the villain of her private little echo chamber. She made you the sad, spineless guy. You were the plot device that made her feel brave." I sat back, every part of me suddenly heavier. That word spineless kept echoing in my head. I had been trying to be kind, trying not to accuse, trying to believe in my wife. And all the while, I was her cautionary tale, told in group chats and whispered across salon chairs. I looked at Clayton, who suddenly didn't seem so confident. He looked like someone realizing too late that he wasn't the hero in the story Ray had sold him. He was just another disposable character with a purpose. "So why show me this now?" I asked. He paused, then said, "Because she lied to me too. About how things ended between you. About how long she'd been pulling this con. And because you deserve to know, you weren't crazy. You were being rewritten. It was too much." I stood up. I didn't take the phone, didn't finish my coffee. I just left, walked straight out into the parking lot and stood there, feeling the morning sun burn into my scalp like a punishment. I wanted to scream, but not from rage. From humiliation. Because I didn't just lose my marriage. I'd been the butt of an inside joke that ran for almost a year. A joke I never auditioned for. A punchline everyone repeated while I kept buying her flowers. I drove back to the hotel in silence. The vending machine was still broken. The hallway smelled like burnt toast. And inside my room, her toothbrush was still in the side pocket of my bag. I took it out and snapped it in half. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to Ray. To everyone she had been talking to behind my back. Her sister. Her stylist. Her so-called loyal friends. One letter. Group email. Every name I could think of. Subject line, "You're in the story too now." The message was simple. You laughed. You knew. You said nothing. Congratulations, you're all officially in her memoir. But I'm the one telling the ending now. And guess what? It's not tragic. Not for me. I hit send and shut the laptop. But just when I thought that was the last twist in the story, Ray herself finally reached out. And she wasn't angry. She was terrified. It was nearly midnight when her name finally lit up my phone. I didn't jump when I saw it. I didn't get that old sting of confusion or betrayal. Just something colder. Like when you step outside and realize winter came early and no one warned you. The message was long. And unlike her usual polished tone, the cheerful deflections, the emoji-laced apologies, this one read like it had been typed in a panic. No punctuation. Misspellings. She was unraveling. Emery, you can't send things like that to people you don't understand what you're doing, please. Just stop. You have no idea what's really going on. You're going to ruin everything I've worked for. I stared at it for a minute. Then she sent another. If you care about me at all, you'll stop dragging people into this. And then another. You don't know what you're getting into. I sat up straighter. Not because I was scared, but because I realized, finally, that she was genuinely scared. And for the first time since this nightmare started, it wasn't me on the floor holding my breath. It was her. That third message stuck with me. You don't know what you're getting into. That wasn't just guilt tripping. That sounded like a warning. A sloppy, emotional, desperate warning. So I did what any fool still clawing at closure would do. I called her. She answered after one ring. Her voice was breathless, rushed. Emery, you can't just go around forwarding private things. I cut her off. You've spent a year turning my life into a group project for your little peanut gallery, and now you want privacy? There was a pause. Then she dropped it. Clay didn't show you everything, she said. That stopped me cold. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't tell him about the investment. My mind spun. What investment? There was another pause. Then, you remember when we opened that joint account last year for my side projects? Yeah. Well, I used it. My throat went dry. Used it how? She finally said it. I pulled out the money 3 months ago. $22,000. Silence. My silence. Then she added, like a disclaimer taped to the end of a bomb. It's not illegal. I had access. It's just ethically complicated. Ethically complicated. Like forgetting to RSVP to a wedding or leaving early from work and not telling your boss. Except this wasn't forgetting. She'd siphoned $22,000, my savings, money I'd put in under the illusion that we were building something, and funneled it into whatever life she was preparing for behind my back, all while telling me to be patient and trust the process. I couldn't speak. I just let the silence stretch between us like a chasm. She tried to fill it with more words, more excuses. It was going to be temporary, just to get a jump start on the retreat business I was designing. I didn't know if it would take off. And Clay didn't even know. I didn't tell him about the money. Not a dollar went to him. I finally found my voice. Quiet, flat, steady. So you weren't just cheating with another man. You were cheating with a whole version of your life that I wasn't invited to. She didn't deny it. She just whispered, I thought you wouldn't notice. And that hit harder than any affair. Not because of the money, but because of the assumption that I was so passive, so blind, so endlessly forgiving, that I wouldn't even notice $22,000 vanishing from our lives. You built a whole other future, Ray, I said. You chose it, funded it, hid it, and then you had the audacity to joke about your dates like I was some sad little fanboy watching from the curb. Her voice cracked then, a small sound, the kind of noise people make when they know the room is burning and they're holding the match. I didn't think it would feel this way, she said. It was supposed to feel like freedom. I almost laughed. You confused betrayal for liberation. But she wasn't done. There's more, she said. You'll find out eventually. I wasn't the only one who used you. It felt like a puzzle piece was sliding into place, except it didn't fit. I asked her what she meant, but she refused to say more. Just kept repeating, I never meant to hurt you, like it was supposed to smooth the cracks. Before she hung up, she added one last thing. Check the red folder in the bottom drawer of the desk. The one you never open. Then silence. I didn't sleep. I didn't pace. I just stared at the ceiling with that phrase tumbling in my head. I wasn't the only one who used you. The next morning, I drove back to the house. I didn't care if she was there. I didn't care if anyone saw me. I unlocked the front door, walked straight to the old oak desk in the corner of our home office, and opened the bottom drawer. There was a red folder inside. What was in it? Everything. The folder wasn't dusty. That's what struck me first. Everything else in the bottom drawer had that thin, lazy layer of forgotten paper grime, the kind that gathers around receipts and old birthday cards. But not the red folder. It was pristine, centered, like it had been placed there recently, almost deliberately, waiting for me. Ray might as well have tied a bow on it. My hand hesitated. I didn't know what I was more afraid of, that it would prove she was lying, or that it would prove she wasn't done. I opened it. The first few pages were bank statements, transfers, names of accounts I didn't recognize. Some under her name, some under her cousin's. One under a joint LLC I'd never heard of before, North Hollow Creative Partners. I stared at that name for a long time. I didn't remember signing anything. I didn't recall even hearing those words. But there it was, my name attached as a partial investor. I flipped faster now. There were invoices, vendor lists, even a soft launch itinerary for something called Retreat Forward, a luxury wellness project scheduled to open in Asheville. I remembered suggesting Asheville last year as a vacation idea. She smiled, nodded, and said, "Let's keep it simple. Too expensive." She wasn't being dismissive. She just already had plans. I kept digging. Behind a few more documents, tucked in a sleeve, was a USB drive in a little labeled zip bag. In Ray's handwriting, media pull/temp files. I didn't trust it, not on my own laptop. So I drove down to the public library and used one of the terminals in the back where no one would look over my shoulder. There were 3 folders on the drive. 2 were just design files and branding stuff. But the third folder, that's the one that shattered whatever pieces I still had left. It was called Promo Interviews. Inside were 5 short video clips. All of them seemed to be test footage. Ray, dressed in different outfits, being recorded by someone off-screen while practicing her pitch for the Retreat brand. Each time, she'd talk about leaving behind toxic patterns, about redefining yourself beyond stale commitments, and about not being afraid to walk away from comfort when it becomes a cage. But it was the final clip that froze me. She wasn't alone in that one. The camera was tilted a little, not professional. Just Ray, sitting on a couch next to someone I hadn't seen in years. A man named Nathan. My brother. My younger brother. They laughed at something just before the clip started. Ray reached over, brushed something off his shoulder, then looked straight into the lens. "This is the real story," she said. "I didn't leave because I was unhappy. I left because I was ready." Nathan nodded. "And because you deserved better than being forgotten." They both laughed again. I didn't hear anything after that. I just sat there with headphones on, the room spinning, my fingers clenched around the mouse like it could anchor me to a reality I still understood. Nathan. I hadn't spoken to him in almost 2 years. We drifted, nothing dramatic. Just life pulling us in different directions. The occasional text. A holiday card. That was it. At least, that's what I thought. He lived 2 states away. He always complained about being broke. He always asked about Ray, how she was, if we were still boring and monogamous. God. He had said that exact phrase 2 Christmases ago. Still boring and monogamous? I thought he was just being cynical. A failed engagement will do that to a guy. But now I could see the look he gave her at Thanksgiving differently. How he stayed late to help clean up while I went to grab dessert from the fridge. How they were always just a bit too in sync. Always talking about books I hadn't read. Shows I hadn't seen. It had started earlier. Much earlier than I imagined. And now it wasn't just infidelity. It was a family fracture so deep I couldn't even begin to figure out where it started. I left the library in a daze. My knees actually buckled outside the door. I sat on the curb, people walking around me like I was invisible. I must have looked insane, just a man holding a red folder and a thumb drive, staring at nothing. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore. It was logistical, strategic, planned. I drove back to the hotel and started piecing things together. The LLC, the account transfers, the investment in Asheville, my brother's business trip to North Carolina last spring, Ray's surprise solo hiking weekend the very same weekend. I had helped her pack. I'd handed her the shoes she wore in that very promo clip. They didn't just lie. They built something on the wreckage of my trust. A new business. A brand. A life. Together. And then they tried to write me out of the narrative like I was a typo they were too tired to fix. The worst part? There was still one more file on the USB. One I hadn't opened yet. It was a voice memo. Titled, "If He Finds Out." I haven't pressed play yet. Because once I do, I can never pretend again. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed for nearly 30 minutes, just staring at the file name on the screen. If He Finds Out. MP3. 5 words. 1 file. A decision. It was like holding a bomb and not knowing which wire to cut, red or blue, or if cutting anything at all would just speed up the explosion. I already knew too much. But that's the sick thing about betrayal. It leaves you starving for the whole truth, even when you know it'll poison you. I finally pressed play. Ray's voice came through first, low and close, like she was whispering right into someone's ear. Probably Nathan's. If Emery ever figures it out, I'll spin it. He'll spiral like he always does. He'll write sad emails or post something online and then disappear for a few days. That's what he does. He retreats. He avoids conflict. He won't confront me. He never has. Silence for a moment. Then the faintest sound, laughter. Not from her. From a man. Nathan. I know that smug, smirking tone anywhere. He's like a fog machine with no music. Just clouding everything with his feelings. Another laugh. Hers this time. Exactly. I mean, he didn't even notice when I moved half my stuff out last month. I was testing him, just to see if he'd say anything. He didn't. He just asked if I needed help carrying my boxes. They both laughed again. It felt like being skinned alive from the inside out. And still, the file wasn't done. The plan is simple, Ray continued. We let him think this is sudden, that it's emotional, that I cracked, that I lost myself. Then the story's easier to sell. Nobody questions that narrative. Woman breaks down, leaves her quiet husband for a second chance at life. Clay believes it, even. He thinks it's romantic. But really, I'm building something. And I'm doing it with someone who knows how to actually take risks. There was a rustling sound, a shift in the audio. Then Nathan spoke again. You're not going to feel bad later? About what? About building a future with someone I trust? Or about leaving a man who still apologizes when he sneezes too loud? And just like that, the clip ended. That was the moment I felt it, the shift. The part of me that had still been holding on to pieces of who we were, trying to cradle the fragments like they were something sacred, that part died. Quietly, without a scream. Just gone. They hadn't just made a mistake. They hadn't even just made a choice. They designed it. Together. Like architects of cruelty. They had rehearsed my reaction. Predicted my collapse. And even when they weren't sure what would happen, they laughed at the idea of me. The man who retreats. The man who spirals quietly. The man who apologizes when he sneezes. They thought I was weak. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying and freeing. They weren't wrong. I had been weak. I had let myself shrink in my own marriage. I had walked on eggshells Ray never asked me to. I gave away power by assuming love required sacrifice without boundary. But now? Now I wasn't shrinking anymore. I wasn't collapsing. I wasn't writing sad emails or sitting in some library corner hoping someone would save me. No one was coming to save me. So I had to rewrite the script they'd written me out of. And that started with one final move. I called a lawyer. Not one of those billboard attorneys with rhyming names. I found someone sharp. A woman. Olivia Trent. Highly recommended by a coworker who'd gone through a brutal divorce and came out the other side with everything she'd been told she'd lose. I met with Olivia the next morning and explained everything. I showed her the folder, the files, the voice memo. She didn't blink, didn't gasp, just took notes with a steel pen and asked, "How fast do you want to move?" Immediately, I said, "I want to catch her mid-stride." Olivia gave a tight smile. Then let's set a trap. Over the next week, we prepared. I followed every instruction. I made no contact. I acted like I'd gone silent because I was crushed, which, ironically, was exactly what Ray expected. I watched her post vague empowerment quotes online about healing and choosing yourself. I saw Nathan show up in one of her tagged photos, cropped halfway out but still obvious to anyone looking. I froze all our joint accounts. Canceled every subscription linked to my cards. I had legal grounds now, not just emotional. Olivia drafted a preemptive separation agreement with proof of misappropriated funds, unauthorized withdrawal, and partnership fraud through that bogus LLC. She was going to be served. But I wanted one more thing. A moment. So I invited Ray to meet me. Public place. Friendly tone. No accusations. Just a calm, wounded ex-husband asking to talk things through like adults. She agreed within minutes. I met her in a bright little cafe, the same one where we'd shared brunch every third Saturday of the month for 5 years straight. She showed up in white, of course she did. Clean. Peaceful. Playing the part. "Emery," she smiled, sitting across from me, voice soft. "I'm glad you reached out." I nodded. I just wanted to understand. Her face lit up. That fake warmth. That false grace. She was already narrating it in her head, how she was kind, how she offered closure to the man too broken to move on. And then the server brought the envelope. I had already prepaid. Inside it was a printed notice. Legal. Neatly folded. She opened it mid-sentence. And that's when her hands started to shake. This isn't, she began. It is, I said quietly. It's real. It's already in motion. The LLC is being reported for fraudulent representation. The investment is under dispute. And Nathan, I leaned in, looked her dead in the eyes. He's being removed from Mom's estate proceedings next month. I already spoke to our uncle. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. And that's when I stood up, took the last sip of my coffee, and said the first honest thing I'd said to her in months. You build a future on my silence. But now you don't even know how to hear me. Then I walked out. But this story's not over. Because there's one more conversation still waiting to happen. The last one, with Nathan. I didn't go straight to him. I let the dust settle. I needed time. Not because I was afraid of Nathan, God knows. I'd given him more grace than he ever deserved. But because I needed to be sure I could speak without shaking. I didn't want revenge anymore. I didn't want to scream, or break something, or even cry. I just wanted clarity. And I wanted it on my terms. 2 weeks after Ray received the papers, Nathan called me. First time in over a year. I let it ring. Then I called him back the next morning. Let's meet, I said. He hesitated. Then agreed. We met at our father's old workshop. Neutral ground. A quiet place filled with rusted tools and half-finished projects. It smelled like sawdust and oil and memories that didn't sting. Nathan stood there with his hands in his jacket pockets, looking younger than he did in those videos. Smaller. Maybe because this time, he wasn't in her shadow or protected by her smile. Emery, he said like it was supposed to mean something. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at him. Really looked. This was the man who helped her build an escape plan using the blueprint of my loyalty. My brother. The person I once shared a bedroom with, whispered secrets to under a blanket when we were kids, and drove across the state for when he got dumped and called me sobbing. And now here we were. I know everything, I said flatly. The money. The business. The timeline. The voice memo. He nodded slowly. I figured. I just have one question, I added. Why me? His face cracked a little, like he'd been holding in a wince for too long. It wasn't about you, he said. It was about her. It always was. I thought I was saving her from a life that didn't fit. She told me you were numb, that she felt invisible. And you believed that gave you a right, I said. He didn't argue. Just nodded. I did. There was a long silence. Just the creak of the wind outside and the low hum of a refrigerator that hadn't worked in years. Do you regret it? I asked. He looked up at me. His voice broke for the first time. Every day. I believed him. Not because I wanted to, but because regret was all he had left. I'm not going to fight you, I said. Not for apologies. Not for tears. Not for some hallmark ending where we hug it out. That's not what this is. Then what is it? It's me reclaiming the space you both tried to erase. I walked past him to the old workbench and placed a box down photos, receipts, screenshots, the drive. Everything. All of it. You can keep this, I said. It's your chapter now. Mine is already moving forward. He didn't ask where I was going. Maybe he already knew it didn't matter. I was leaving the story they wrote for me, and that was the point. I got into my car and drove 5 hours north to a cabin I'd rented on a whim. No Wi-Fi. No noise. Just trees and still water. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel like I was running or hiding. I was just existing, without needing anyone else to approve or explain it. In the weeks that followed, I started painting again. I'd forgotten how much I loved it. I reconnected with old friends. Reapplied for jobs I once felt too timid to reach for. I even went on a few walks with someone new. No labels. No pressure. Just fresh air and quiet conversation. Ray sent one more email after the legal dust settled. A short one. You were always more than I deserved. I just didn't see it until it was too late. I hope you find someone who does. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to anymore. Some stories don't need to be finished with fireworks or flames. Some just need to end so something better can begin. And mine? It's beginning now. Quietly. Honestly. Fully mine.